To finish up here, we're going to look at a couple of generic problems to help you kind of, once again, just think about this idea of price elasticity of demand. So the scenario is you're the curator of a museum. You run the museum. The museum is short of funds, so you decide to increase revenue. A noble task, or a noble endeavor here. Should you increase or decrease the price of admission? Explain. So what do you think you should do here? If you say, I'm not sure, that's a great answer. The question is, why aren't you sure? The question about why you aren't sure is because you don't know, or you might not be certain about how the demand curve for museums is structured. Is it an inelastic product, or is this an elastic product? Well, if the price of the museum changes, if it increases, what do you think people would do? Would they stop going? Would they start coming more? Or would it behave like insulin, where the price wouldn't really affect their decision to go to the museum? I would probably say, you know what, I think that the museum is probably an elastic. That has an elastic demand curve, where when the price changes, people will adapt their behavior. So if he jacks up the price to try and increase his revenue, I'm going to go to the movie theater, maybe I'll go to a different museum, or maybe I'll go to the science center, or I'll go to the aquarium or the zoo. But I'm not going to the museum. And in that case, he'd be better off doing what? If it's an elastic demand curve, he'd be better off doing the task of lowering the admission price, because he'd probably get a bigger bump in the quantity of people coming to his museum. They'd start leaving the zoo, they'd leave the aquarium, and so on and so forth. Now, Netflix here is an interesting case study, because a couple of years ago, I don't know if maybe I'm dating myself here, but Netflix jacked up the price. Like, put their price about 100% increase. I think they went from like $9 a month to like $16 or $17 a month, which is a huge increase. I mean, that's almost a doubling of the price for a monthly subscription. And guess what happened? Revenue for Netflix went up a lot, because not many people left. Certainly didn't see a 50% reduction in Netflix subscriptions, that's for sure. And Netflix has really blossomed, even though they charge more, because there's really not a substitute for Netflix. I mean, you can talk about Redbox, and you can maybe talk about iTunes or whatever, but nobody has the vast amount of online content and the quick turnaround time for DVDs, and good Lord, Netflix put Blockbuster out of business. I mean, so Netflix is fairly inelastic at this point. So for them, the play to increase their revenue, jack up the price. And so that's kind of an interesting real-world phenomenon, because I remember it so vividly when Netflix did that. People were like shocked and astonished, and wondering what was going to happen. And what happened was Netflix grew as a result. But that's also a product of them having their unique demand curve that not every other firm has. Now, let's also look at another question here. If you have any questions about that explanation, or how I talked about that, by all means, please let me know, and I will help you out. Now, this is a great question, because it shows you how you have to know about your midpoint method formula. And I'm actually going to pause for a second. I want to bring over the midpoint. So I brought out the the midpoint method formula here, which gives us the coefficient for the price elasticity of demand. And so it tells you here the price of the good decreases by 3%, and the total revenue increases. Well, some kids get hung up on this because they go, okay, I got 3% on the bottom, and what goes on the top? Well, what was the change in the quantity? I don't know. But if the price goes down and the total revenue goes up, what's that tell you? That's your total revenue test. So this is a combination. You have to know about both of them. So if the price goes down and the total revenue increases, hint, hint, wink, wink, this is an elastic product. All right? Now, look at your choices here. See if you can figure out the answer before I tell it to you. Actually, I'm going to write a few things first. So 1.3 is greater than 1. So if I go over here, oh, greater than 1 is elastic, it says. So now, boom, if Mr. Sutton was right, oh, total revenue method, boom, 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 it's elastic. Oh, the 1.3, that works out beautifully. So you have to know about the numbers that come out of this formula here. If it's 1, it's going to be unit elastic. But notice the bottom here. And that's what I really want to point out about this problem, are these bottom 3. They're all less than 1. So what's true about these answers? They are all the same answer. They are all inelastic. Man, I see why I type this instead of write most of the time. Inelastic. So they're all the same answer. So you couldn't pick one of these, really, unless, of course, they were maybe perfectly inelastic, which is the 0. But so here's the perfect melding of these two concepts. You have to know about the coefficients, whether they're less than 1, 1, or greater than 1, and what they mean as far as elastic or inelastic. But you also have to know the total revenue test, and this question makes you do both of those things. So hopefully, I didn't give you a second at the beginning to do it on your own. Hopefully you tried. I apologize for that. So at this point in the ballgame, I don't really have anything else to give you about price elasticity of demand. You have it all. So you have your practice problems. If you have any questions, please let me know. But to end this video, I'm going to ask you a question that hopefully you will know the answer to. All right? So I'm going to put it up, and this time I'm definitely going to give you time to take a look at it. I'll read it to you, and then you try to pick the best answer. So which of the following statements accurately describes an inferior good? Go ahead, pause your video for a second, take a look at your options. I'll wait, and see if you can select the best answer. So it's helpful if you remember what an inferior good is, or at least an example of one. So I'll type in my favorite, oodles o noodles. Okay, and so what's the deal with oodles and noodles versus, say, filet mignon? Did I spell filet mignon? Close enough, whatever. So what's the difference between the two? Well, oodles noodles, you know, no offense, but this is a poor man's food. Filet mignon, that's a rich man's food. So let's see if I got anything that kind of goes like that. A good that is purchased more frequently as a person becomes wealthier. Oodles and noodles ain't like that. Filet mignon is. So A is not an inferior good. B, a good that is purchased in conjunction. Conjunction means with another good. That sounds like a substitute to me. Not an inferior good. A good that is purchased in place of another good. In place of another good. Do I buy oodles and noodles in place of filet mignon? I'm going to keep C. I'm going to keep C and see what happens here. A good that is purchased more frequently as a person becomes less wealthy. That sounds almost exactly like what I talked about, so I'm definitely keeping C and D right now. E, a good that is purchased less frequently as a person becomes less wealthy or poorer. No, when I become poor, I buy more oodles and noodles. Again, filet mignon, I buy less of that when I become poorer, so E is out. And in fact, E and A are the same thing. Hopefully you recognize the opposite of an inferior good. Does anybody remember the name? Is a normal good. So a good that is purchased in place of another good. You know, that as I look at that option, it's enticing, right? But it's not how we think of an inferior good. D is your correct answer here. Now the question is, why, Mr. Sutton, are you talking about inferior goods all of a sudden? Well, the deal is, where we go next is, the price elasticity of demand is like a must-know. You have to understand it for the AP test. But there are other types of elasticity as well. And if you notice, a good that we're comparing two things here. We're comparing the quantity demanded, the amount purchased, the amount that people desire, and we're comparing it to their income here. So this is going to be our next investigation, where we look at how the relationship between people's incomes and their quantity demanded of products, how they correlate. And it'll be what we call the income elasticity of demand. And we will calculate it very similarly. And since you know the difference between an inferior and a normal good, hopefully, it won't be too tricky for you. A couple years ago, I got into some trouble. I really emphasized price elasticity of demand, and I diminished or ignored more these other ones. And lo and behold, what happened? What showed up on a free response question? income elasticity of demand. So I won't make that statement mistake twice, and hopefully you'll be better off for it. So stay tuned. We're going to compare incomes to quantity of demand in just a second.